Welcome to Fear Street.
I've worked at this sandwich joint for over 1.5 years. We run a tight-knit crew. I'm a good employee, in good standing with the owner and manager, and I'm a little bit of a night crew manager myself. The restaurant is very slow, as we tend to receive maybe 20-30 customers within my entire 6 to 7 hour closing shift. This means that I naturally tend to start conversations with customers. I like to figure out where people work their day jobs, where they went to college, how their lives are, and all that stuff. About a week ago or so, this man came in. I'd say early 30s, dark hair, dark features, sweatpants, a Nike sweatshirt and hood up. It was late at night, say 9:30ish, and I was ready to close this bad boy up and get home, but I had another half hour to kill. So I said, screw it, let's start a conversation with this guy. Maybe his dad is like a congressman or something cool. Maybe I'll learn something from him. As it turns out, the guy was creepy as hell. He wouldn't meet my direct eye line. He would talk to me by looking above or in between my eyes. He kept his left hand tucked in the back of his pants waistline. I realize that sentence is a bit hard to visualize, but the best visual I can give is like when people tuck a gun on the back of their pants. It was like he was clutching a gun. He kept his hand there the entire time. He was looking nervous and reluctant, as most people who commit robberies do. As the sandwich making process progressed, I was becoming more and more sure that I was about to be robbed. He asked for a ham sandwich on white bread. The way we lay the ham is pretty formulaic, but due to his creepy demeanor, I was admittedly feeling nervous. The 8 slices of ham ended up being folded over at different ratios, laid on top of each other sloppily, and didn't look like too appetizing of a sandwich. He asked for Swiss cheese. The formula calls for 4 slices, so as I always do, I picked up a stack of the triangularly cut cheese and fanned it out in such a way where I could grab 4 and throw the rest back into the pile. I laid the cheese in a less than orderly fashion, and the sandwich is still clearly missing its picture perfectness that you see on TV. These details may seem irrelevant, but I just want you to know the gist of it. You'll see why. The man asked if I could toast his sandwich. This means that I'd have to turn my back to him for a few seconds to throw it in the toaster. I was running a lot of things through my mind, and I wasn't prepared to turn my back to him. This caused a sort of mini panic, and I grabbed his sandwich and attempted to stand in such a way where I could keep my eye on him, with my waist twisted enough to get the sandwich in the toaster, but still be looking at him. As you may have guessed, I dropped it. I dropped the sandwich. I made a basic attempt to catch it as it fell, Kinda like flared my knee up and tried to use my waist as a sort of cushion to hold up my elbow to catch the sandwich, but to no avail. I was panicking hardcore. In the few seconds before I looked up, I was bracing myself for a very angry creep staring at me, but he was gone. He had left. He vanished. I didn't even hear the squeak of the door, the footsteps, nothing. I ran outside. I looked left, looked right, looked left again, and no cars were driving away. No cars were even parked remotely close enough for him to be hiding in or behind. He was just gone. The sandwich was still on the ground, fallen face down. One of the triangles of cheese landed in just the perfect angular contrast with the tiles of the floor. Of the 8 pieces of ham on the sandwich, 6 were left between the bread and the floor, while 2 pieces flew off and landed adjacent to the cabinet, on top of which the toaster is located. Fast forward to last night. A man much older than the first comes in. I'd say 60s, white hair, dark features. Probably about 6'6". He was probably the tall, dark, and handsome type of dude in the 70s or something. Pretty nice man, up until he started ordering his sandwich. He ended up asking for white bread. I started to carry on my casual conversation. "How's your night going, sir? Just getting off work?" The man answered with a stern affirmative and offered no further information. Okay, clearly this guy didn't want to talk about anything other than his sandwich. Weird. "What kind of sandwich for you, sir?" "Ham." Alright, pretty stern guy. No nonsense. Maybe he's like in the mafia or something shady like that. Maybe he got nervous when I asked about work. Alright, fine. Let me make your sandwich and get you out of here, man. He then reaches behind his waist in the exact same way the first guy did. I swear to God, the gesture and motion were the exact same smoothness, timing, and form. He kept his left hand there the exact same way the other man had about a week ago. The same way. Everything started eerily coming back to me now. It was like the most jolting deja vu moment I'd ever had. And honestly, I thought it was just that, deja vu. But wait, there's more. The way I ended up laying the ham looked very, very familiar. The distance between each slice, the way each layer peeled off the stack in ratio to the next, the way the slices folded over. I can honestly swear to you that I was building the same sandwich that I built just a week ago. I was having one of those moments where a bunch of different things pass through your mind all at once. And it's actually kind of surprising just how many thoughts you can have in such a short amount of time. But I remember telling myself to take the risk and just reach for the Swiss, because I just had the feeling. How do you know I wanted Swiss? I was taken aback. He actually wanted Swiss. How in the world do I pass it off as a lucky guess? Well, exactly how you'd think. Lucky guess, I uttered, as I let out a pathetic little chuckle. The man proceeded to say the most spine-chilling thing I'd ever heard. He looks at me as if I told him I knew the winning lottery number for the next win. Very inquisitive look. Very strong sense of passion in his words when he said this. No, seems like you've done this before. He just called out my deja vu. He just confirmed that he was aware of my deja vu. At this point, the phrase time traveler just made its first entrance into my mind. I looked at him with the most ridiculously awestruck impression. I sat there staring at him for a good 5 seconds before I laid the cheese. It was a surreal moment. It was like the climax of this confrontation had already happened, but I still needed to lay the cheese and veggies, roll the sandwich up, and then ring him up at the register. How much creepier is this gonna get? I just didn't get it. I picked up the cheese in the exact same way I always do, fan out the top 4 slices, and lay them down. I was looking down at the same sandwich I had built a week prior. I swear to you, the cheese, the bread, the ham, everything was just uncannily similar. I credit myself to be a rational guy, so at this point I was just calling it deja vu and trying not to feel disturbed. The man said, just lettuce and mayo, no toast. Phew, not toasted. Thank the good Lord. He didn't want it toasted. This deja vu is over, and it's all just a coincidence, right? Well, some of you all may not know, but there's a thing called a hot food tax in some places. Therefore, when a sandwich is toasted, there's a button for hot food taxation, and it's something like 12 cents. So as a force of habit, I read the order back to the customer in this fashion. All right, sir. So a ham sandwich, not toasted, with a bag of chips and 2 cookies? He looked very concerned with why I mentioned it wasn't toasted. Why did you have to specify that it's not toasted? Then I explained to him what I said above, all about the hot food tax and blah blah. Force of habit, because if a sandwich is toasted, you repeat the order like, all right, a ham sandwich, toasted, with chips and a drink, or something like that. After explaining that to him, he was just kind of inquisitive about it. Nothing too weird. I didn't want to keep him any longer, so I took his card, swiped it, and couldn't wait for him to get the hell out. As he walked out the door, he looked back at me with the creepiest smile you can conceive. He turns around and says what I honestly don't think I'll ever forget. Just to let you know, I did not toast the sandwich because of the tax. I'm not that much of a cheap bastard. Okay, the guy's trying to lighten the mood, right? Sweet. Yeah, I know he's not a cheap bastard. I mean, it's 12 cents. But he felt the need to tell me the real reason he didn't get it toasted. I just didn't want you to drop it. And just like that, he was gone. This happened in early 2000. I was working at a juvenile detention center in a small town in Oklahoma as a corrections officer. I was working nights at the time and went to work at 9 p.m. This one particular night, when I arrived for work, my supervisor looked confused and asked me what I was doing there. I said, I work tonight. And he said, but they said you called in a few hours ago, saying that you were sick. I was a bit confused and said, it must have been someone else, and they got the message wrong. After everyone else showed up for work that night, it was a bit weirder, but we carried on as usual and assigned everyone their places for the night. I went to work in the control room, where I usually do. The control room is the center of the prison. It has direct control over the cameras, doors, phones, and everything. After I relieved the guard on duty and settled in for the night, I looked at the message that said I called in. It said that I'd called in at 6:50 and said that I'd gotten sick while out cleaning up after the storm. There'd been a storm the night before, and it was a bit bad, but not anything that I had to go out to clean up. It was truly weird. The supervisor came into control about that time. He was also a friend of mine outside work, and we started talking about it and how odd it was. I decided to call my wife at home and tell her about it while he was still sitting there. I picked up the phone and dialed. After 2 rings, a man picked up the phone and in a raspy voice said, "Hello?" I didn't know what to say for a few seconds. I looked at the phone to make sure I had dialed the right number, and I had. After a few seconds, the person said, "Hello?" Again, in the same raspy voice. I said, "Hello? Who is this?" "This is Taylor. Who is this?" the person said. My head started spinning, because my name is Taylor also. I said, almost in a scream, "Where is Ann?" He said, "Ann's in bed. Who's this?" I dropped the phone and told my supervisor to ring me out. I had to get home, and I took off towards the door. I could hear Dave pick up the phone behind me and say hello, followed soon after by, "What the hell?" rather loudly. I ran to my car and drove home faster than what was legal, my mind racing the entire time. I busted through the door, and my wife was sitting watching TV and was shocked at me being home. I asked her who had been there, and she said no one had. After a rather long talk with her, I went to call the prison to tell them what was going on, but the phone was dead. I went back to work, and when I came in, Dave was acting weird and asked me, "How the hell are you doing this?" He told me that when I left, he picked up the phone, and the person on the other end sounded like me. He kind of freaked out and hung up. A minute later, as he could see my car leaving the parking lot, I'd call back from home and ask what the hell was going on. He said that I was irate and said I was sick and didn't feel like playing these games, and that I was telling him to stop prank calling me, and hung up. After convincing him I had no idea what was going on, we went back to work. Later, I find out that the phone line for my area had been knocked down the night before by the storm. This is absolutely the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. 8 years ago, I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment by myself with 2 cats. I had a girlfriend named Elsa who lived 45 minutes away on her college campus. Most weekends, she'd drive into town and stay at my place until she had class again on Monday. We did regular things as we didn't get to see much of each other. We liked to spend time alone together, watching movies, playing games, and so on. Please keep in mind that neither of us were drug or alcohol users, as I have a good job I can't risk losing, and she just simply never cared for intoxicants. Nor were either of us on any medication. So it's Saturday night, 11 p.m. Elsa and I are sitting on the couch watching a movie. I can't remember which. We're dressed, sober, and alert. We had slept in that morning and had plenty of sleep. We're chatting, laughing, and talking. The TV's illuminating our immediate area, and I'd kept the light on in the kitchen to provide some ambient light for the living room as well. My cats are asleep in their favorite chair. All is well. Everybody's safe and comfortable. Suddenly, without any kind of warning or inkling, the jump, as I've come to call it, happened. You know when you're watching dialogue in a movie and they're using 2 cameras to film? When they switch from camera to capture who's speaking, how seamless it is? With no clipping, interruption, fading, or transition effects? It was that sudden. We were having a good time together in the living room when, in an instant, I found myself sitting on the foot of my bed, clothes removed, in the dark. For about 1/2 of a second, a million thoughts raced in my mind. Had something fallen off the wall and hit my head? Did I have a seizure? Was I dreaming the whole time? Where's Elsa? Then the scary part. I turned to my right, and Elsa's also sitting on the foot of the bed next to me, clothes removed. Her eyes are the size of golf balls, and she's trembling. I realize I am as well. I try to speak and ask her if something happened, but I'm so frightened, I only stutter. After looking around the room and realizing we were alive, she managed to ask me what happened. I didn't want to answer, in case it was just me, and I didn't want to come off as nuts. I just looked at her. After a pause, she started asking me again if I'd turned off the lights, or removed our clothes, or if I knew what was going on. I didn't. Neither of us had experienced any grogginess or confusion before the event. Furthermore, we didn't experience any sensations other than fear and confusion after it. No aches or pains, no bumps, bruises, or cuts. I reached for my phone to call my mom and see if a doctor would be appropriate. I noticed that it's not 11 p.m. anymore. Now it's 3 a.m. In that sudden instant, that instantaneous change of scene, 4 hours had passed. Everything in the house had been turned off, and we'd been stripped. We went to the ER, as my mom's fear was a gas leak. No signs of toxins or injury were found on either of us. Elsa made an appointment for a CAT scan, which also came back as expected. I explored possibilities like a gas leak, poisoned consumer goods like our soda or fast food, neurological malfunctions, and more. But the one thing that always bothered me was the fact that Elsa and I lost and acquired the time at the exact same instance, 4 hours apart. Neither of us witnessed anything that the other didn't, and there were no lingering effects. For weeks I kept bringing it up with her, just hoping one of us would remember something. I browsed forums from all type of sites, searching for answers. Every time I brought it up, Elsa would get scared at the memory and beg me to just let it go. I couldn't. It was September of 2015. I was a freshman who had just entered high school 2 weeks prior. Already, school was weighing down on me, and I'd been continuing a habit I had of going on walks to clear my mind. On this day, I'd been walking around a pond near my house. There's a trail that goes around the pond, and then the trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which sit about 15 feet above the path and pond below. After walking the circle, I was crossing the train tracks when I decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take the path below the train tracks, but there isn't any way to cross the pond without going all the way back around. And being 14 years old, I decided that I could just jump from the tracks onto the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry, and the paramedics sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I'm thinking they're both broken. This scene continued on for a few minutes, until we arrived at the hospital, and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. After only a few minutes, I eventually lost all consciousness, and that image of the emergency room was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I'd just hit the ground after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I'd jumped, but there had been a car parked watching me, and the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance. The ambulance ride was the exact same as it was the first time, and I was put into the same emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events were that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much less severe. I was discharged from the hospital the same night, with only stitches in my lip, a slightly fractured jaw, and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed that the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I'd had while I was unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks after, when my mom told me that the people who had helped me said that I'd been unconscious the entire time. I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything. So that entire scenario managed to happen in the few seconds it took for me to hit the ground while I was still conscious.